The Paris Accord no one signed. There was no ceremony, no signatures, and no official document. Yet after Paris moved, markets behaved as if an agreement had been reached, not written in law, but understood in practice. To understand why this unspoken accord mattered, we need to look at how financial stability is sometimes negotiated without negotiation. France sat at the center of Europe's institutional gravity. Its banks were large, its state influential, and its signals carefully watched. When Paris adjusted its posture, others adapted without being asked. That dynamic still shapes Europe today. The story begins in a period of quiet strain. No crisis headlines dominated the news. Balance sheets looked sound. Reforms appeared to be working. Yet beneath the surface, pressures were building unevenly across the continent. Some systems tightened. Others relied on patience. Coordination existed, but it was fragile. Inside Paris, policymakers saw the risk clearly. Acting loudly would have forced commitments from others who were not ready. Acting alone would have fractured trust. Doing nothing would allow misalignment to deepen. The solution was neither announcement nor inaction. It was behavior. French authorities adjusted their stance subtly. Liquidity support was calibrated. Supervisory tone shifted. Expectations were signaled through action rather than speech. Nothing was declared. Everything was observed. Markets reacted immediately. Funding patterns adjusted. Confidence stabilized in places where it might have thinned. Other governments noticed as well. Without a meeting, without a vote, alignment began forming. Paris had moved first, and others followed to avoid standing apart. What emerged looked like agreement without authorship, a shared understanding of limits, of restraint, of how far support would go, and where discipline would resume. No one could quote it. Everyone could feel it. This was not coordination by rule. It was coordination by example. Paris did not demand compliance. It created conditions where divergence became costly. In doing so, it shaped behavior across borders without ever naming the framework. The Paris Accord no one signed was never intended to be permanent. It was a moment of alignment, fragile and conditional. But in that moment, it prevented drift from becoming fracture. And that is how some of Europe's most important agreements are made. Not on paper, but in silence. The unspoken accord held because it aligned incentives without fixing obligations. Each participant retained sovereignty. Each institution preserved authority. Yet behavior converged as if a rule existed. Markets enforced it faster than any treaty could have. Inside France's financial system, the shift was felt immediately. Banks adjusted balance sheet usage. Liquidity was held a little longer. Risk was priced a little more carefully. None of this was mandated. It was inferred. The signal was not about restriction. It was about tone. Other European institutions responded in kind. Supervisors elsewhere mirrored the posture. Funding desks adjusted expectations. The absence of contradiction mattered more than affirmation. No country wanted to be seen as the outlier when Paris had clearly recalibrated. What made the moment effective was plausibility. Paris had the capacity to act decisively if needed. That credibility allowed subtlety to work. Markets believed restraint was chosen, not forced, and choice carries authority. Critics later argued this was coordination without accountability. They were not wrong. No framework governed the alignment. No mandate defined its limits. But that absence was also its strength. Flexibility remained intact. The accord could dissolve as quietly as it formed. The danger lay in misinterpretation. Because nothing was written, participants relied on observation. If signals were misread, alignment could fracture abruptly. Silence required constant attention. Everyone had to watch everyone else. For a time, it worked. Stress eased. Divergence narrowed. Confidence stabilized without announcement. The system had bought itself time, without spending credibility. The Paris Accord no one signed demonstrated a recurring European truth. When authority is fragmented, influence often travels through behavior rather than law. Action precedes agreement. Practice defines policy. But such accords are fragile by nature. They depend on trust, timing, and shared understanding. And once conditions change, silence can no longer carry alignment alone. The strain appeared when conditions shifted just enough to test the silence. External pressure rose. Funding costs nudged higher. Markets began searching for confirmation that the unspoken alignment still held, and silence, which once reassured, now invited interpretation. Some institutions moved preemptively. Liquidity was hoarded. Risk was reduced faster in certain jurisdictions than others. The divergence was subtle, but visible to those watching closely. The accord had not broken, but it was no longer automatic. Inside Paris, awareness sharpened. The strategy had always relied on observation, not enforcement. Now observation revealed hesitation elsewhere. The question was whether to speak and formalize expectations, or to move again and let behavior do the work. Speaking carried risk. Naming the accord would bind it. Binding it would invite challenge. Moving quietly again risked misreading in a more nervous environment. Timing became critical. Too early, and markets would test limits. Too late, and alignment would fracture on its own. The response came through calibrated action. French authorities adjusted operations in ways that were impossible to ignore, but unnecessary to explain. Support mechanisms were refined. Supervisory emphasis tightened. The signal was firmer, but still wordless. Markets reacted immediately. The hesitation eased. Funding patterns realigned. Institutions that had begun pulling back slowed their retreat. The message was clear without being spoken. The center was still engaged. What this moment revealed was the cost of informal power. It must be exercised continuously. Silence cannot be left unattended. Influence without structure demands constant presence, or it evaporates under stress. The Paris Accord no one signed survived because it adapted, but the adaptation exposed its limitation. Alignment without rules depends on vigilance, and vigilance is finite. The system had avoided fracture again, but it had also learned that silence works only while attention remains perfectly tuned. The alignment faded the same way it formed, without announcement. As pressure stabilized, behavior gradually diverged again. Institutions reclaimed autonomy. Supervisors returned to national priorities. The accord dissolved, having served its purpose without leaving a trace. Paris did not attempt to preserve it. That was never the goal. The unspoken agreement was a bridge, not a foundation. It existed to carry the system across a moment when formal coordination would have been too slow or too fragile. What remained was memory. Markets remembered how quickly alignment could emerge without instruction. Governments remembered that influence could be exercised without treaties. And institutions remembered that silence, when credible, could move faster than law. The Paris Accord no one signed did not become precedent. It became a reference, a reminder that Europe's system contains layers of coordination that operate beneath visibility. They are not permanent. They are situational, and they depend entirely on trust. The lesson was subtle but enduring. Not all stability is codified. Some of it lives in shared understanding, reinforced through behavior rather than rules. That stability is powerful, but temporary. When conditions demand clarity, silence must give way to structure. When conditions allow discretion, behavior can lead. Knowing the difference is the real skill. Paris never claimed to have led. It simply moved first. And for a moment, that was enough to hold the system together. So, what do you think? Are we repeating the same mistake again? The